All right, so you wanted to get to the bottom of this whole anti-education thing.
Yeah.
Is it real? Is it actually as dangerous as some people are saying? And what's even causing it in the first place?
Right.
Well, we did a deep dive into this really thought-provoking essay, try to get you some answers.
Okay.
And let me tell you, it was quite a ride.
Yeah, it's definitely a trend, I think, that needs to be carefully considered and examined.
Yeah.
The essay really argues that we're not just talking about, like, disagreements over what's being taught in classrooms,
Right.
but a deeper resistance to, like, expertise itself.
Oh, wow.
And even the very idea of a society that is governed by laws and rules,
Okay, I see where this is going.
which is a pretty concerning thing if you think about it.
Yeah, that sounds a little scary.
Yeah.
So let's start with the basics, I guess.
Okay.
Why are people turning against education? It seems kind of counterintuitive.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, the
Well-
essay kind of lays out a few core reasons why this is happening. One of them is this growing distrust towards people that are seen as the elite.
Yeah.
So people are feeling like educators and intellectuals are kind of out of touch.
Right.
They're pushing agendas instead of just, teaching.
Oh, so it's like the classic us versus them kind of narrative?
Exactly. And that narrative, it just feeds into this
Yeah.
other massive factor.
Yeah.
Just the huge amount of misinformation that's circulating now.
Right.
I mean, conspiracy theories are spreading like wildfire.
It's crazy.
And it's leading a lot of people to distrust anything that comes from institutions like schools
Right.
or, government agencies and any of those established institutions.
Yeah. So it's almost like people are picking and choosing what they want to believe based on how it makes them feel.
Yes.
Rather than the actual facts.
It's about the feeling, not the evidence.
Wow.
And then you can't leave out the economic anxiety piece of it all.
Oh, right. Of course. Yeah.
That plays a big role. I mean, for a lot of people, higher education just feels completely out of reach,
Yeah.
which leads to resentment towards people who do have those degrees.
I can definitely see that.
You start to think the system is rigged against you.
Yeah.
And it's hard to shake that feeling once it sets in.
Absolutely.
And here's where things get even more messy.
Oh, no.
Because you have certain politicians who actually use that very real economic anxiety to get votes.
Oh, so they're like manipulating people's fears?
Exactly. They paint intellectuals as the enemy.
Wow. So it's all connected.
Yeah, it's this whole mix of distrust, misinformation, economic anxieties, and then even political manipulation.
That's a lot.
It's a recipe for disaster in a lot of ways.
No wonder this anti-education thing is such a big deal.
Yeah.
But it can't just be grumbling and, online arguments, can it?
Oh, no, it's gone way beyond that.
Really?
We're seeing actual real-world consequences now.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, think about all the book bans that are happening in schools.
Oh, right, where certain groups are trying to, control what kids can even learn about. Like all those attempts to ban books about race and gender identity.
Yes, exactly. Those are prime examples.
That we've been seeing in the news lately.
Yeah, and then on top of that, you have this push to defund public schools.
Which I guess ends up hurting everyone.
It hurts everybody, but especially kids in low-income communities.
Right, because they often rely on those schools the most.
Exactly. It's a really vicious cycle.
It's like they're trying to control what people are even allowed to think about.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big concerns the essay brings up.
It's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. It's all about power in the end.
And then there's this whole trend of just completely dismissing experts.
Oh, yeah.
Scientists, historians, you name it.
It doesn't matter what field they're in.
Yeah.
Their work is just being rejected without any real basis.
It's like the whole concept of being an expert is under attack.
It really is.
So we have this distrust of institutions, this explosion of misinformation, and then these really scary attempts to control information and discredit experts.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It really is kind of overwhelming, to be honest.
I understand.
But what about the long-term consequences? What happens if we just let this anti-education thing keep going?
Well, the essay doesn't try to sugarcoat it.
Okay.
It paints a very stark picture of what could happen.
Okay.
The argument is that a democracy can only really function if people are educated enough to make informed decisions.
Right.
Without that foundation, they're just way more vulnerable to manipulation.
So it's not just about, schools and textbooks. It's
Right.
about the future of our entire country.
Exactly. It's about our ability to govern ourselves.
Wow.
And then there's the obvious economic impact.
Right, because a skilled workforce is essential for any kind of innovation.
For growth, for everything.
And that comes from education.
Of course.
It's pretty simple. If we don't invest in education, we're going to fall behind.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, we can't compete in a global economy if we don't have a well-educated population.
Right.
But the essay also talks about the social consequences too,
Oh.
right? So it's not just about, the economy and jobs.
It goes much deeper than that.
Okay.
The essay really emphasizes that education helps people understand each other.
Right.
It helps them bridge differences
Yeah.
and engage in constructive dialogue.
So without it, society just kind of falls apart.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
We become more divided and more prone to conflict.
Exactly.
Wow, I'm starting to see how deeply connected education is to every aspect of our lives.
It's the foundation of everything.
It's not just some, abstract concept.
Right.
It affects literally everything.
It does.
This is getting a little heavy, I have to admit.
I know, it's a lot to process.
Yeah, but the essay offers some hope too, right?
It does.
It's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
We can fight back.
Okay, good.
And the essay offers some pretty concrete strategies for doing that.
Like what?
Well, one of the most important things is promoting media literacy.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Basically, it means teaching people how to spot fake news and to think critically about the information they're consuming.
Right.
Because not everything you read online is true,
Yes.
but people need to be able to tell the difference.
So things like fact-checking websites, learning how to evaluate sources, recognizing bias.
Exactly. All those skills are more important now than ever before.
Because of all this misinformation floating around,
Precisely.
we need to know how to navigate this crazy information landscape.
You do?
And of course, we have to invest in public education.
Absolutely.
It needs to be high quality
Yes.
and accessible to everyone regardless of their background.
That's the key.
Because a well-educated population benefits everyone.
It lifts everyone up.
Right.
And finally, we have to be willing to talk to each other,
Even when we disagree.
especially when we disagree.
That sounds hard.
It can be, but it's necessary.
Okay.
We need to understand where these anti-education feelings are coming from
Right.
and address them with empathy.
So it's about bridging divides, finding common ground, having tough conversations, but doing it with respect.
That's the goal.
This whole thing reminds me of something we've talked about before.
What's that?
This idea that we've moved from the information age to the misinformation age.
Oh, that's a great point.
It seems kind of paradoxical, right? We have more access to information than ever before,
Right.
but it's also easier than ever for lies to spread.
Exactly. And if
Yeah.
people don't have those critical thinking skills, they're going to get swept up in that tide of misinformation.
So it's not just about having information.
No.
It's about what you do with it,
Yes,
how you process it, how
Yeah.
you figure out what's real and what's not.
exactly.
The essay goes into a lot of detail about how this attack on education is showing up in very specific ways.
It does.
Do you want to explore those a bit more?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to pick up in part 2.
It's good to me.
So one of the most alarming things that the essay points out
Okay.
is this whole trend of basically censoring what can be taught.
Oh,
Like, we're seeing more and more of these attempts to just ban certain topics from even being talked about in schools.
right. It's usually the stuff that's considered controversial or like challenges traditional values.
Exactly. It's like they want to sanitize history and control the narrative
Yeah.
and present this very specific version of reality.
Right. The one that fits their worldview.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to history either.
Oh, really?
No, you see efforts to censor discussions about race, gender identity, even climate change.
Wow.
All these crucial issues that students really need to grapple with to understand the world.
Right. It's like they're afraid of open dialogue, or afraid of critical thinking itself.
I think there's definitely an element of that.
Yeah.
It's like they want to keep young minds in these little boxes, you know?
Right. All neatly categorized and controlled.
Exactly. And I think a lot of this fear comes from just a fundamental misunderstanding of what education really is.
Okay. How so?
It's not about indoctrination.
Right.
It's about giving students the tools to think for themselves.
To like form their own conclusions.
Exactly. It's about helping them become informed, engaged citizens
Right.
who can participate in a democracy.
So it's not about telling them what to think, but how to think.
Precisely. And that's what makes these attempts to control information so dangerous.
Right. Because it undermines that whole process.
Exactly.
So we talked about book bans.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other tactics that the essay brings up?
Well, another big one is the defunding of public schools.
Oh, right.
This is basically another way to attack education as a whole.
Okay.
We're seeing this push toward privatization,
Mm.
which often leads to a much wider gap in the quality of education that's available.
Especially between different socioeconomic groups.
Exactly. It creates a system where your access to good education is basically determined by how much money you have.
Which just perpetuates inequality.
It does, and it's like we're moving further and further away from this idea that education is the great equalizer.
Right, because in theory, public education was designed to give everyone a chance to succeed.
Exactly, regardless of their background.
So when we defund it, we're undermining that whole principle.
We are, and it's incredibly short-sighted.
Yeah, and honestly pretty dangerous.
It's a recipe for social division unrest, a future where opportunities are only for the privileged.
That doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't. And it's not just about fairness either, although obviously that's a huge part of it.
Right.
But it's also about the health of our society as a whole.
Okay, I see what you mean.
When we invest in public education, we're investing in our collective future.
We're investing in a more informed, more engaged, and more productive population.
Exactly. Everyone benefits.
So it's a win-win for everyone.
It should be.
Okay, so we've talked about book bans and defunding schools. The essay also mentions this trend of discrediting experts.
Yeah, that's a big one. And it seems like it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, it's like expertise itself is being devalued.
It really is. We see it in politics and the media,
Yeah.
even just in everyday conversation.
Right, it's like everyone's an expert now because of the internet.
That's a big part of the problem.
Everyone has a platform.
Everyone has an opinion.
And suddenly all those opinions are considered equal.
Yeah, regardless of whether they're based on any actual
Right, or years of research and experience.
This easy access to information can create this illusion of expertise.
Yeah, I can see that happening.
People read a couple of articles or watch some YouTube videos and think they know more than someone who's dedicated their life to studying a topic.
But there's a big difference between having access to information and actually understanding it.
Huge difference.
Right, that's where real expertise comes in.
And that's where education is so important.
Yeah.
Because it teaches us how to actually evaluate information.
Right.
How to separate fact from fiction. How to form opinions that are actually informed.
It all goes back to that media literacy thing we were talking about.
It does.
We need to give people the tools to be able to navigate this insane amount of information.
Exactly, to recognize bias. To understand how information is being manipulated.
So it's not just about having information.
No.
It's about what you do with it.
It's about being an active participant in the process.
Right. Not just passively consuming whatever comes across your screen.
Exactly. You have to be critical. You have to engage with the material.
This is all pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
But I want to go back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
About this rejection of education sometimes going hand in hand with the disdain for the law.
Right. That's a pretty disturbing idea.
It is. It's like some people think they're above the law.
Yeah, that the rules don't apply to them.
Which is super dangerous for any society.
Absolutely. I mean, laws and governance are what hold a society together.
Right. They provide structure, they ensure fairness, they protect our rights.
When people start rejecting those things, it creates chaos and stability.
Yeah. And it ultimately leads to harm.
Exactly. And we're seeing this rise of this me-first mentality.
Oh, yeah. Where individual desires are put above the common good.
Right. And that can lead to some pretty dark places.
It's like the opposite of what education is supposed to do.
Yeah. I mean, education is supposed to instill a sense of civic responsibility.
Right. To help us understand our interconnectedness.
To value the common good.
Exactly. And the essay makes this argument that this disregard for the law is often connected to this rejection of education.
It's like a rejection of authority, a rejection of expertise.
A rejection of any kind of system.
Right.
It's like they want this idealized version of freedom.
But it's a freedom that ignores the rights and well-being of others.
Right. It's a freedom that ultimately leads to anarchy.
And that's why this trend of rejecting both education and the rule of law is so concerning.
Because it's a threat to the very fabric of society.
It is. It's a threat to democracy, to the economy, to social cohesion, to everything.
Okay, so we've explored a lot of the negative aspects here.
Yeah, we've covered some pretty dark territory.
But the essay does offer some hope, doesn't it?
It does. It talks about ways to combat this trend.
Okay, so what can we do?
Well, a lot of it comes back to what we've already discussed.
Like media literacy.
Exactly. We need to help people become more critical consumers of information.
But it also talks about the need to invest in public education, right?
Yes, absolutely.
We need to make sure that it's high quality, that it's accessible to everyone.
And that it actually equips students with the skills they need to thrive in the world.
Especially in a world that's changing so rapidly.
Exactly. We need to make education a top priority, not an afterthought.
It needs to be at the forefront of our national conversation.
It really does.
Okay, so we need to promote media literacy and invest in public education.
Yes.
What else does the essay suggest?
What also stresses the importance of dialogue and empathy.
Even when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard. We need to be willing to listen to each other.
Even when we disagree.
Yes, even when we find the other side's views frustrating or even offensive.
Which can be really hard sometimes.
It can be, but it's essential.
Okay, so how do we actually do that?
Well, it starts with trying to understand where these anti-education feelings are coming from.
Right. What are the anxieties, the fears that are driving this?
Exactly. Instead of just dismissing people who hold these views.
We need to engage with them.
Yeah, try to understand their perspective. Look for common ground.
It's about building bridges instead of walls.
Exactly. Finding ways to connect rather than divide.
And recognizing that we're all in this together.
Our shared future depends on our ability to communicate, to understand, and to work together.
So the essay focuses on the U.S.
Right.
But are these anti-education trends happening in other parts of the world?
That's a great question, and it really underscores the fact that this isn't just an American problem.
Right.
It's a global phenomenon.
So it's happening everywhere.
We're seeing similar trends in different parts of the world.
Wow.
I mean, the specific context and the ways it shows up might be different, but the underlying themes are often very similar.
Like what?
Distrust of institutions, the spread of misinformation, the rejection of expertise.
So what are other countries doing about it? Are there any success stories we can learn from?
Yeah, there are definitely some promising initiatives out there.
Okay, good.
Some countries are focusing on really strengthening media literacy programs.
So teaching people how to spot fake news and evaluate information.
Exactly. Others are investing a lot of resources in public education.
Okay.
Making it more accessible and equitable.
Right.
And making sure it's actually preparing students for the modern workforce.
That makes sense.
And some countries are really promoting open dialogue and civic engagement.
Trying to bridge those divides.
Exactly. And foster a sense of shared responsibility.
So there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
No, it's about finding what works best in each specific context.
Right. But the goal is the same everywhere.
To counter these anti-education sentiments and make sure everyone has access to the knowledge and skills they need.
To thrive in the 21st century.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive has been a real wake-up call.
I know, it's a lot to take in.
It's not just about textbooks and classrooms.
Right.
It's about the kind of society we want to live in.
The values we want to uphold.
The future we want to create.
It all comes back to education.
So it's about recognizing how important education is.
Not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Right. It's about being informed and engaged citizens.
About thinking critically.
About supporting policies that give everyone access to good education.
And being advocates for the power of learning.
It's about never losing that curiosity.
That desire to keep learning and growing.
And remembering that education is more than just absorbing facts.
It's about developing the skills to navigate an increasingly complex world.
It's about becoming lifelong learners.
Challenging our assumptions.
And understanding that education is a journey, not a destination.
It really is.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the dangers of this anti-education trend.
We have.
And the importance of investing in education. But the essay also touched on something else that I think is really important.
What's that?
It talked about the economic anxieties
Oh, right.
that are fueling some of this.
That's a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, how do we address those anxieties?
It's a big question.
How do we make education and job training more accessible?
More affordable.
For everyone.
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
People need to feel like the system is actually working for them.
Right.
That they have a fair shot at a good life if they're struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And they see education as this expensive, out-of-reach thing that doesn't even guarantee a job.
Right.
It's easy to see why some people might turn against it.
It's like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
The people who could benefit the most from education feel like it's rigged against them.
Exactly.
So how do we break that cycle? What can we actually do?
Well, one big area we need to address is the cost of higher education.
Okay.
I mean, it's just become way too expensive for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that student loan debt can be crippling.
Absolutely.
We need to look at things like tuition assistance, debt relief programs, more scholarships.
So basically anything that makes college more affordable.
Exactly. We need to remove those financial barriers so that a desire to learn isn't crushed by the fear of debt.
But it's not all about 4-year degrees either.
Right? You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Not everyone needs or wants to go to a traditional college.
Right.
And we need to invest in other pathways to good-paying jobs.
Okay, so like what?
Things like vocational training programs, apprenticeships,
Oh, right.
those kinds of things that don't require a bachelor's degree.
So it's about creating more options, more diverse pathways to success.
Exactly.
And making sure those options are affordable.
Yes.
And accessible to everyone.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we need to make college more affordable and invest in other kinds of training programs.
Right.
What else?
Another crucial piece is dealing with job displacement.
Oh, right, because automation and globalization are changing the job market so quickly.
Exactly. And we need to make sure people have the skills to adapt.
So like retraining programs for workers who've lost their jobs because of technology.
Exactly. They need new skills to stay competitive.
So we need to be proactive.
Absolutely. We need to anticipate the needs of the future workforce
Right.
and equip people with the tools to succeed.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, it means investing in education and training that focus on the skills that are in high demand.
Okay.
Things like tech skills, data analysis, critical thinking, problem solving.
So it's not just about making education more affordable.
Yeah.
It's about making it relevant.
Exactly. It's about helping people see the connection between what they're learning and how those skills can translate into real-world opportunities.
Because when people see that connection, they're more likely to embrace education.
Of course, they see it as a pathway to a better life.
This whole conversation has really made me realize something.
What's that?
Education is about so much more than just individual advancement.
It is.
It really is the foundation of a healthy society.
It's the bedrock of a strong democracy,
A thriving economy.
a just and equitable society.
Yeah, it gives people knowledge, critical thinking skills.
The ability to participate in civic life.
It's about creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Exactly. Regardless of their background or their circumstances.
It's about fostering a love of learning,
A curiosity about the world.
a desire to keep growing and evolving.
And understanding that we're all in this together.
Right. Our collective future depends on our ability to educate ourselves and each other.
To value knowledge and to use it wisely to build a better world.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
So many insights, and honestly, it feels like a call to action.
I agree.
We started by talking about why people are turning against education. We explored the dangers of that trend.
The complex factors that are contributing to it.
Yeah, we talked about media literacy,
Public education.
dialogue, empathy. We even looked at some global perspectives.
And some potential solutions that other countries are trying.
But I think the most important thing we talked about is the power of education.
Absolutely, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
We really dug into how it's connected to democracy, to the economy, to social justice.
To our ability to face the challenges of the 21st century.
It's all connected.
So what does this all mean for you? What can you take away from this deep dive?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But it really comes down to recognizing the huge impact that education has on every aspect of our lives.
It's about being informed and engaged citizens.
About thinking critically.
Supporting policies that promote access to education.
And being advocates for the power of learning.
It's about never losing that curiosity, that desire to learn.
And remembering that education isn't just about absorbing facts.
It's about developing the skills to navigate a complex world.
It's about becoming lifelong learners, challenging our own assumptions, and understanding that education is a journey, not a destination.
It's about equipping ourselves with the knowledge and skills to not just survive, but to thrive.
To build a better future for ourselves and for generations to come. And it's about remembering that the pursuit of knowledge is a shared endeavor.
We learn from each other, we grow together, and we create a better world when we embrace the power of education.
That's it for this deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.